They told me the lake keeps its dead. Old Bramwell said it to my face on the 7th spring, standing beside me on the gray shingle with his hood up against the wind, because he was the only one left who dared. 7 winters, my king. The Graymere gives back driftwood and drowned deer and the bones of fools. It has never once given back a wife. She is with the still water now. Let her rest and let yourself. I did not strike him. I had wanted to the first spring, and the second, when men said such things to me with pity in their mouths. By the 7th I only stood and watched the meltwater climb the black stones, brown and swollen and loud, carrying the winter's death down out of the mountains the way it did every year, and I said nothing, because there was nothing to say that I had not already said to the water 1,000 times, and had answered only by the water's roar. 7 springs I had walked this shore. 7 times the ice broke high in the passes, and the rivers came down in the dark, and the Graymere rose against its shingle like a living thing turning in its sleep. And 7 times I came here at the height of the flood and stood where I had last held her, as if the water might be shamed into remembering what it had taken. It never was. Water has no shame. That is the first thing the drowned country teaches you, though I did not know it yet. Come away, Bramwell said. The council waits. The council always waited. That was their whole art. They had waited 7 years for me to grow tired of grief, the way a man grows tired of a wound and finally lets it close over the thing lodged inside. They meant it kindly, most of them. Caerloch is a lake hold, and a lake hold without a Luna is a hearth without a fire. It does not die at once, but it grows cold from the middle out, and every soul in it feels the cold and looks to the king to end it. I had given them 7 years of cold. They wanted their spring. So I went up from the shore, and the wind came off the Graymere behind me smelling of snowmelt and rot and the green underneath, and I climbed the stair to my own hall, as a man climbs to a thing he dreads. They were ranged along the long table under the antler beams, the elders of the Caerloch pack, and at the near end sat Lord Farron of the Weirholt, who was not of Caerloch at all and had no place at my table except the place his ambition had bought him. He had a daughter. He was forever finding reasons to sit near me and mention her, her gentleness, her strong blood, her fitness to warm a cold hearth. He rose when I came in, and bowed just deeply enough, and I marked as I always did that his bow had a smile folded inside it. "My king," Farron said, "you look weary. The flood is a hard season for you. It need not be another year. Say what you came to say." The elders looked at their hands. It was Aldith who spoke, because Aldith was old and had held me as a pup and had earned the right. "Emeric, we do not ask you to forget her. No soul in this hold has forgotten Aloan. She was ours too. For one night she was our Luna, and we grieve her still. But a pack needs an heir. It needs a Luna at the hearth and pups in the nursery, or in 20 years there is no Caerloch for anyone to grieve in. You are the last of your line. We are not asking you to stop loving the dead. We are asking you to let the living live." It was the truest and kindest thing anyone had said to me in 7 years, and it went into me like a blade, because I had no answer to it. I put my hand flat on the table to steady myself, and the elders all looked at the hand, because they knew what was on it. The mate mark. You will not know unless you are wolf-blooded and bonded what a mate mark is. It is not a tattoo. It is not a thing done to the skin. When the bond takes between 2 fated souls, and it is fate, whatever the young ones say, it is not a thing you choose any more than you choose your own heartbeat. A mark rises on the back of the bonded hand, each to each matched, unique as a face. And while your mate lives and the bond is whole, the mark holds a low warmth and a low light, gold under the skin, so faint you forget it is there until the dark, when you can hold up your hand and see the one you love is alive somewhere under the same sky, because the mark still burns. Mine had gone gray. Not black. Black is for a bond broken by betrayal, a bond cast off, and hers was never that. Gray is for death. Gray is the color of ash after the fire has gone all the way out. On the night the flood took Aloan, my mark had blazed once, a terrible gold, so bright it woke me, And then over the long gray hours of that night it had cooled and dimmed and gone at last to the color of cold ash, and it had stayed that color for 7 years, and every wolf who knew the meaning of it looked at my hand and knew. His mate is dead. The bond has gone to ash. Let him take another. The marks do not lie. The mark, Aldith said gently, nodding at my hand. You carry your proof with you, Americ. It grieves me to say it, but you know what the gray means. I looked at it. Ash on the back of my hand, in the shape she had worn, matched on hers, a curve like a wave folding over. We had laughed at that the one day we had it whole, that the Waterhold's king should be marked with a breaking wave. I had stopped being able to feel her through it on the night she drowned. 7 years of silence where there had been, for one night only, a warmth, a hum, a sense of another soul breathing at the edge of my own. Silence is a hard thing to argue with. The mark is a hard thing to argue with. Every reason in the world sat at my table telling me to close the wound and let it heal, and the only thing on the other side of the scale was a stubbornness I could no longer even call hope, only habit, the habit of a man who walks to the shore each spring and refuses to be reasonable. Give me until the flood is down, I said. Let the water fall, and I will hear Lord Farron's daughter's name, and we will speak of it properly. Farron's smile came a little further out of its fold. The elders let out a breath together, as men do when a long-dreaded thing is at last moving. And I hated all of it, and hated myself for saying it, and I would have taken it back with my whole heart, except that at that moment the door at the low end of the hall banged open, and a scout came in wet to the knees and white in the face, and everything I thought I knew about my life turned over like a boat. My king, he could barely get the wind for it. Smoke, there's smoke in the drownwood. For a moment no one understood him. The drownwood is the flooded forest at the north end of the Greymere, where the river's old course runs, a wide low country of standing dead pines drowned when the mere first rose in my grandfather's day, black trunks bare as spears out of the black water for miles, and nothing living in it but fish and the birds that nest in the dead crowns. No one goes there. No one can. There is no ground to stand on for a league in any direction, only water and the dead trees, and here and there a hummock of higher land too small and too far to matter. Men have drowned trying to cross it. We do not cross it. It is a place the living give to the dead. Smoke, the scout said again. Cook smoke, steady, rising off the far hummocks past the old spearwood. Been rising 3 days, the fishers say. They were afeard to tell it. My king, something's living out there. Something's keeping a fire. The hall went very still. And on the back of my hand, under the gray, so faint I might have dreamed it, something moved. I did not tell them that. I did not trust it. A man who has wanted one thing for 7 years will feel that thing in a shadow, in a trick of the light, in the ache of an old wound before rain. I only stood, and my chair went over behind me, and I heard my own voice say, "Ready a boat." "My king," Bramwell said, "the flood's at its height. The drownwood in flood is death. No boat will." "Ready a boat," I said, "or I swim." They readied the boat. We went out before dawn, 4 of us, myself, and young Corin, who could read water like a written page, and 2 others strong at the oars, in the shallow, flat-bottomed punt the fishers use, because nothing deeper of keel could go where we were going. The Greymere at flood is not the gray glass of summer. It is a brown mussel. It heaves. It carries whole trees down out of the north with their roots in the air like drowned men's hands, and it wants your boat. It wants it the way a dog wants a bone, and you feel the whole time that the water is only letting you cross because it has not yet decided to take you. I sat in the bow with my gray hand gripping the gunwale, and I watched the black spearwood come up out of the mist ahead, rank on rank, the drowned pines, and the light came gray and then pink over the mountains behind us. And Corin steered us in among the trunks where the current slacked, and the roar of the open mere fell away behind, and we went into a silence I had no name for. The drownwood in flood is a cathedral of dead things. The black trunks rise straight out of the still brown water, close-ranked, and go up and up into their broken crowns, and the light comes down through them in long gray bars, and there is no sound but the drip of your oars and far off, the knock of some loose branch against a trunk, over and over, like a slow hand knocking at a door no one will open. Birds went up ahead of us in white handfuls. The water was so still under the trees that the dead pines stood doubled, each with its drowned twin hanging head down beneath it, and we rode through the middle of that doubled forest as through the seam of the world, half in the country of the living and half in the other. There Corin breathed. Ahead, faint through the trunks, thinning up into the gray bars of light, smoke, gray-blue curling alive, cook smoke. Someone, out here in the country of the dead, was boiling a pot. And under the ash on the back of my hand, the warmth came again, not a dream this time, not a shadow. A warmth, low and certain, like a coal you thought was out breathing under the gray when the air finds it. I looked down, and the gray of my mark was not gold, not yet, but no longer only gray. A dull glow was coming up in it, deep down, the color of an ember an hour after you thought the fire was dead. I said nothing. I could not have spoken. I gripped the gunwale and I made Corin row faster, and the smoke drew nearer through the trees, and the hummock rose out of the water ahead of us, a real island, a shoulder of higher land with living green on it, willow and alder and grass, a scrap of the ordinary world set impossibly in the middle of the drowned one. And on it, drawn up on a mud beach, 3 little caracals of bent withy and hide, and above the beach, smoke rising from a low turf hut with more huts behind it. And racks of split fish drying, and a garden fenced against the deer with woven wattle, and a path worn in the grass by feet that came and went, feet, human feet, a place where people lived. People stood up along the beach as we came in. 6, 7 of them, ragged and lean and brown, a bent old man, a woman with a spear, 2 half-grown lads, coming down to the waterline not in fear exactly but wary, the way wild things watch, and behind them wolves, 3, 4 gray wolves rising out of the grass with their hackles up, and a knot of half-grown pups scrambling at the wolves' legs, and all of it impossible, a whole living world where there should have been nothing but the drowned dead. And then she came out of the hut. She came out wiping her hands on a cloth at her waist, called out by the wolves rising, and she stopped at the top of the beach with the smoke behind her and the gray light on her, and I knew her. 7 years. She was leaner and browner, and her hair was longer and bound back in a plait gone half to gray at the temple, though she could not have been more than 30, and there was a white seam of an old scar through one eyebrow, and she stood the way she had never stood in my hall, braced, waited, a woman who has carried and dug and hauled and killed to eat, a woman the soft world had been burned off of. She was not the gentle girl in the wave-marked gown who had put her hand in mine one night 7 springs ago. She was harder and plainer and older, and she had a spear in her hand held low and ready without her seeming to know she held it. And she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen or will ever see, and the mark on the back of my hand woke. It did not warm slowly. It broke into gold all at once, the gray burning off it like frost off a stone in the sun, gold up the back of my hand and up my wrist and up the veins of my arm to the elbow, warm, so warm, a heat I had not felt in 7 years and had told myself I had dreamed, and with it, under it, through it, came the thing I had no words for and have none now, her. The low hum at the edge of my own soul that I had lain awake missing for 7 winters, another heartbeat beating just past mine, a warmth in the dark that said, alive, alive, I am alive and here. It had never been ash. It had been buried. 7 years the flood had carried her so far and held her so long that the bond had gone down under distance and grief the way a coal goes down under ash, not out, only silent, only waiting for the air. I heard myself make a sound I have never made before or since. I was over the gunwale into the shallows before the punt had grounded, going up the beach through the cold brown water with it dragging at my knees, and the survivors fell back and the wolves boiled forward growling, and I did not care. I did not see them. I saw only her and she. She lifted the spear. "That's far enough," Eloin said. I stopped. Not because of the spear, Because of her voice. It was her voice, the voice I had heard in my sleep for 7 years, and it was leveled at me flat and hard and afraid, and her eyes on me were the eyes of a wild thing that has learned what men are, and she did not know me. No, that is not true, and I will not tell it as a prettier thing than it was. She knew me. I saw the knowing go over her face like a wave, saw it stagger her. The mark on the back of her own hand had woken too. I could see the gold of it around the haft of the spear. I could feel it. The two marks calling to each other across 10 feet of muddy air like two struck bells. She knew me to the root of her. And she lifted the spear anyway, and her knuckles were white on it. And I understood in that moment, standing knee-deep in the flood with my heart torn open, that knowing me and trusting me were no longer the same thing, and had not been for a long time, and that the water had taught her something about being found that I was going to have to learn if I ever wanted to hold her again. "Eloan," I said, only her name. It broke in the middle. "Don't," she said, her voice shook, the spear did not. "Don't come up here saying my name like—" She stopped, swallowed. Behind her, the old man had a hand on the shoulder of one of the lads, holding him back. The woman with the second spear had come up level with Eloan, shoulder to shoulder, and it struck me even then, even drowning in her, that these people would die for her, that they had ranged themselves at her side against a strange armed man off the water without a word needing to be said, and that whatever she had been in my hall she was something else here, something with people at her back. "You know me," I said. "I know what you are." Her chin came up, the scar pulled at her eyebrow. "You're off the hold, your care lock. I can see the wolf on your cloak pin from here. A breath. Which makes you his men or you're him, and either way you'll turn that boat around because there's nothing here for the hold to take. These are my people. This is our ground. We dug it and drained it and we hold it, and no lord off the gray water is going to." "Eloan," I held up my hand. The mark blazed on it, gold, unmistakable, its wave curling over. "Look at my hand." She looked, she could not help it. I watched her look, and I watched what it did to her, and it was the hardest thing I have ever watched because it was not joy. It was grief. Her face broke the way ice breaks, all at once and along 100 lines, and the spear point wavered at last and dropped, and she made a sound low in her chest, and she said in a voice gone suddenly very young, "It went gray. I felt it go gray. 7 years mine's been gray. I thought you were." "I thought you were dead," I said. "The lake keeps its dead," they told me. Every spring for 7 years they told me. And every spring I came to the shore because I could not make myself believe them. I took one step up the beach, only one, slow, my hands open at my sides. Yours went gray because mine did. Because the bond went down so far under so much water that neither of us could feel the other through it, and we each of us looked at our ash and believed the worst, because the worst is what the mark said, and the mark has never lied before. Another step. The wolves had stopped growling. They stood now with their heads low and their ears working, watching the two marks burn, and one of them, an old gray bitch, blind in one eye, came forward past Eloan's legs and put her nose against the back of my glowing hand and stood there trembling. "It lied this time," I said. "You were never dead. You were only very far away, keeping a fire, where no one who loved you was brave enough to look." Eloan was crying now, without moving, the tears just coming, the way rain comes off a slope that is already full. But she did not drop the spear entirely, and she did not come to me. And I made myself stand where I was and let her not come, because I could feel it now through the open bond, the thing under her grief, fear. Not of me. Of this. Of the world reaching into the drowned country where she had made herself safe by making herself hard, and offering her back the soft thing she had buried in order to survive. 7 years she had grieved me and gone on. To be told now that the grief had been for nothing, that I had been alive the whole while she starved and dug and buried her own hope so she could get through the winters, I think that was almost past bearing. I think it would have been easier for her in that moment if I had truly been dead. The dead cannot fail you again. "Eloan," said the old man softly behind her. "Girl, put it down, look at his hand, look at yours." His voice was gentle and cracked. I've lived long enough to know a faded mark when I see two of 'em light. There's no faking that. That's the real thing, girl. Come up the water to find you. He put his hand on her shoulder. You've kept a light burning 7 years for the lost. Well, here's one the water didn't finish come home to you. Let him up the beach. She let me up the beach. I will not pretend the rest was easy or quick, because it was neither, and I have learned to distrust the tales where the lost one is found and all is mended in a breath. Nothing is mended in a breath. We are not marks on a hand. We are the years the marks lived through, and hers had been 7 hard years that mine had not shared, and there is no closing a gap like that with a single embrace, however much both hearts want it. But she let me up the beach, and when I came to her at last she did not step back, and I did not seize her. I had learned already in 10 feet of walking that seizing was the one thing I must never do. I stopped an arm's length off, and I lifted my glowing hand, palm out, the way you'd offer your hand to a wolf you did not want to startle, and after a long moment she lifted hers, the wave mark burning gold on it, and she laid her palm against my palm. And the bond, which had been a hum, a warmth, a knowing, came all the way home. Both marks flared so bright the survivors flinched and the wolves whined, and I felt her whole soul pour into the open channel between us. 7 years of it, the flood and the cold and the terror and the grinding endless labor of staying alive, and under all of it, buried deepest, the one thing she had never let herself feel until this instant because feeling it would have killed her. How much she had wanted me to come. How every spring when the meltwater rose she had stood on her little beach and looked south toward the hold she could not reach and thought, he is walking the shore now. If he is alive, he is walking the shore, and made herself stop thinking it because it did no good. And I poured back into her everything I had, the shore, the gray mark, the 7 years of refusing, the boat readied before dawn, and she felt it all land, felt that I had never once believed them. And she put her forehead down against our joined hands and wept as I do not think she had let herself weep in 7 years. And I stood in the drowned country with my dead wife's living breath against my knuckles, and I was, God help me, happy, a raw and terrible happiness. The kind you can only feel standing in the ruin of the grief it ends. How, I said when she could hear me. Eloan, how are you alive? The flood took you off the jetty, I saw it take you. The water came up in the dark and you were there, and then the whole jetty was gone and you with it. We searched for a month. You searched the shore, she said, into our hands. You searched south. The flood took me north. She lifted her head. Her face was wrecked and shining, and it was the most alive thing in that whole dead forest. It took me north and down all night. I couldn't fight it. I stopped trying to fight it because fighting it was drowning me. I just held to a tree that was coming down with me, and I let it carry me. And when the gray came, I was miles up the drownwood with the dead pines all around and no shore anywhere. And the tree I was holding fetched up on this hummock. She looked around her at the hut, the racks, the garden, the wolves, the people. This hummock. This one scrap of ground in the middle of all that water. I crawled up it half dead, and I lay in that grass there for 2 days. And when I could stand, I looked around and understood there was no getting back. A league of drownwood in every direction. No ground, no boat, and the flood not even at its height. So I stopped trying to get back. Her jaw set. There it was again, the hardness, but I saw now it was not coldness. It was the shape courage takes when it has to last. I stopped trying to get back and I started trying to live. That's the whole of it, Emeric. That's 7 years. I started trying to live, and then somebody else washed up half drowned, and then somebody else, and I found I could not live and let them not, so I kept them too, and it grew. They washed up, I said, here. The drownwood catches them. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. You don't know on the hold, because on the hold the flood takes people and they're gone. But they're not always gone. The current that took me runs them all up into the dead pines, and most drown, but some fetch up, on this hummock or on one of the others, half dead, alone, no way home. And then they die of being alone, of giving up, because there's no reason to dig a garden if you're the only soul in a drowned forest and no one is ever coming. She looked at the old man, at the woman with the spear, at the 2 lads, at a younger woman who had come to the hut door with a baby on her hip, and her whole hard face changed. went soft and fierce at once, a mother wolf's face. So I gave them a reason. I found them and I hauled them up here and I made them dig the garden and split the fish and mind the pups, whether they wanted to live or not until they wanted to. That's what I've been doing. 7 years. She looked back at me and her chin came up one last time and I understood this was the heart of it, the thing she most needed me to hear. I didn't survive out here, Emeric. Anyone can survive. I built something out here. These are not strays you found the king's lost wife keeping. These are my people. I am not the girl you lost. I am what she turned into when the water didn't kill her. And if you've come to carry that girl home, she drowned. 7 years ago, she drowned. I stayed 3 days in the drownwood before I understood what I had to do. And they were 3 of the strangest days of my life. I sent Corin back that first evening with the punt to tell the hold I lived in would return, and to say nothing else, nothing of Eloan, nothing of the drownwood, because I did not yet know what I was bringing home or how, and I would not have Farron's smile or the council's careful pity touch this until I was ready. And then I stayed, and I let Eloan show me the world she had made, and I learned it the way you learn a foreign country, with humility, because it was hers and not mine, and I was a king nowhere inside it. I learned the coracles, the little round boats of bent withy and hide she had taught herself to make, that could go where the flat punt could not, in among the closest pines. I learned the fish weirs she had woven into the drowned channels, and the fire drill, and which of the dead pine hummocks bore fruit in autumn and which held deer. I learned the wolves, a broken pack of orphans. She'd raised them from a litter washed up mewing on a mat of reeds, and they answered to her the way my own trained wolves at the hold have never answered to me, not from command but from love, because she had lain in the cold with them as pups and warmed them with her own body when they would have died. The blind gray bitch, the eldest, never left her side. And I learned the people, Aldous the old man, who had been a boatwright before the flood and had thought himself done with living, Mara the spear woman, hard as Eloan and half in love with her, I think, in the way you love the one who made you want to live. The lads Pell and Call, who had been washed up as small boys years apart and had grown up in the drownwood knowing no world but this one. Young Sella and her baby, the newest, taken from the water not 2 years gone. 7 souls the flood had meant to kill, and had not, because one drowned girl had refused to let it. And I watched her among them, and I fell in love with her all over again, and it was not the same love, and that is the truest thing I can tell you. I had loved the gentle girl in the wave-marked gown for the gentleness. I loved this woman for the iron under it, for the 7 years of it, for the reason she'd given 7 broken people to dig their gardens. The girl I'd lost had been lovely. The woman the water made was magnificent, and terrible, and entirely her own, and I understood by the second day that the great danger was not that I would fail to win her back, but that I would try to win back the wrong woman, that I would try to reach past the survivor to the girl I remembered, and in doing so tell her that everything she'd become, everything she'd built, everything these 7 years had cost and made, was only an unfortunate detour on the way back to being my Luna. I would not do that. I would rather have lost her again. So on the 3rd night, when the fire had burned low and the others had gone to their huts, and the wolves lay heaped and steaming in the cold, and it was only the 2 of us on the mud beach with the black drowned pines standing all around in the starlight and doubled in the still black water, I did not ask her to come home. I said, I have to go back tomorrow. She was quiet, the fire ticked. The flood's falling, I went on. The punt can make the crossing while it's still high enough to slack the current. Another week and the water will drop too far and the drownwood will be uncrossable till autumn. I have to go tomorrow. I turned the gray, the gold of my marked hand over in the firelight. And I want to say the thing I most want to say, which is, come with me. Come home. Be my Luna, be at the hearth. Let me spend the rest of my life making up 7 years to you. That's what I want. I'd say it on my knees. I made myself look at her. But I've been 3 days in your country, Eloan, and I've watched you and I've understood something. If I take you back to Caerloch and leave these 7 behind, Aldous and Mara and the lads, Sella and the little one, the wolves, if I carry you home like a rescued thing and leave the world you built to sink back into the water, then I haven't found you at all. I've only drowned you a second way. Because you are not the girl who fell off the jetty. You told me that the first hour, and you were right, and I heard you. You're the woman who kept a light burning in the drowned country for 7 years, so the lost would have somewhere to wash up. And I will not ask that woman to abandon her light and come be an ornament at my hearth. I'd sooner have no Luna at all. She was staring at me. The firelight moved on the old scar through her eyebrow. So I'm not going to ask you to come home, I said. I'm going to ask you what you want to do, and whatever it is, I'll bend Kerlock to fit it. If you want to stay here and keep the drownwood, then I'll come to you, I'll build a way across, a chain of the coracles, a season house on the near hummock, and I'll be a king who is half the year in the drowned country and let the council say what they like. And if you'll come home, then you don't come alone. You come as the Luna who found 7 of the hold's own lost people and would not let the water have them, and you bring every one of them and the wolves and the light, not rescued, returning, at the head of your own people with your work in your hands. I spread the gray gold hand toward the dark huts, the drying racks, the sleeping wolves. That's the only Luna I want, Eloan, the one who built this, not the one I lost, the one the water made, so. My voice was not steady anymore, and I let it not be. What do you want to do? For a long time she did not answer. The fire ticked and settled. Somewhere out in the black pines the loose branch knocked, slow, against its trunk, the drowned country knocking at its door. Then she reached over, not for my hand but for my gray-gold arm, and she wrapped both her rough, scarred hands around it, and she put her forehead down against it as she had that first hour, and she said, so quietly I felt it more through the bond than heard it, "You have no idea how long I have wanted someone to ask me what I wanted, instead of telling me I was saved. We might have had it all our own way, a returning, a bringing home, a slow, glad chain of caracals ferrying 7 souls and a wolf pack south to Kerlock out of the falling flood, if Farron of the Weirholt had been a patient man. But Corin, coming back to the hold, had not been able to keep the whole of its secret. A boy who has seen the king's drowned wife alive in the drownwood cannot keep his face from shining, and Farron read faces for a living. He had a great deal to lose, a daughter half promised to a hearth about to be reclaimed, and he moved fast and cruelly, and he thought cleverly. He did not challenge me. He knew better. Instead he went to the council and to the old law, and he found in it the thing he needed. That souls washed up off the flood, unclaimed, unpacked, living outside any hold's protection, are strays under the law, and a lord may claim strays found on the water and bind them to his own hold's service. And on the 4th morning, as I was making ready to take the punt back with the first plan half laid, Farron of the Weirholt came up the falling drownwood in 3 war punts with a dozen armed men, to claim the drowned country's people as strays of the Weirholt before I could make them Kerlock's own, and in the claiming, to make Eloan herself a stray, unpacked and unclaimed these 7 years, and so put a lever under the whole thing. I heard his boats before I saw them. The drownwood carries sound strangely, and a dozen oars in that silence is a thunder. The survivors went still all over the beach, the old wariness coming up in them like a tide, and the wolves rose growling, and Eloan came to my shoulder with her spear and said low, "Whose?" "Weirholt," I said. I had seen the pin. Cold went through me, and then something colder and steadier underneath it, the thing I am for, the thing a king is for. "Farron, he's come to claim your people as strays before I can claim them as Kerlock's." I looked at her. "Under the law he can try. Unclaimed souls off the flood are any lord's to bind." Her face did not break this time. It hardened all the way into the woman who had held a spear on a king. "They are not strays," she said. "They are mine." "I know it," I said. "Now let me be your king for 1 hour, and I'll make the law know it too." The war punts came grinding in onto the mud, and Farron stepped out dry-shod on a plank his men laid for him, in a good cloak with the Weirholt weirpin at his throat, and he looked over the beach, the huts, the racks, the garden, the wolves, the ragged, watchful people, and Eloan at my side with her spear. And his eyes found her marked hand and my marked hand and the twin gold of them. And I watched him understand that his daughter's hearth was lost, and watched him decide to burn what he could not have. My king, he bowed, the smile deep in it. The hold rejoices you found her, truly a wonder, and more than her I see. He gestured easy at the survivors. A whole nest of the floods lost out here past the law. This is a great mercy you've stumbled on, Emeric. These poor souls living like beasts these years, unclaimed, unpacked, outside any hold's protection, why, they're strays, every one in the eye of the old law. It falls to a lord to take them up. And as it happens, I've come prepared to do that kindness, and to bind them to good order at the Weirhold, where they are not strays, I said. The law says. I say, I did not raise my voice. In 7 years of grief I had forgotten, I think, what my own voice could be. I remembered it now, and I saw Farron's men remember it and take a half-step back on the plank. The old law names strays as souls off the flood who are unclaimed and unpacked. Look at them, Farron. I did not look away from him. They are neither. They are claimed, I claim them. Emeric of Caerloch here before witnesses, every soul on this hummock, under my hand and my hold's protection from this breath forward. And they are a pack, Farron. They have been a pack for 7 years. They have a Luna who found them and fed them and would not let one of them die. And a Luna makes a pack as surely as an Alpha does. It is the oldest law under the law you're quoting me. I held up my marked hand and let the gold of it burn in the gray light. This is the Luna of Caerloch. These are her people. They were her people before you launched your boats this morning, and the only thing your law can do here is witness it, or drown trying. Farron's smile was quite gone now. A Luna, he said, unclaimed and unpacked herself these 7 years off the flood by your own law astray. Say the next word, I said very quietly, and find out whether the king of Caerloch lets a man call his fated mate astray to her face on her own ground, and lives to sail home. The drownwood was very still. Even the knocking branch had stopped. And then Elowen stepped forward, past me, and I let her, because I had said I would be her king for 1 hour, and the hour was hers to end. She walked down the beach toward Farron with her spear held low and easy, and behind her the wolves flowed forward in a gray tide and fanned out to either side of her, hackles up, and behind the wolves Aldous and Mara and the lads came down off the racks with their fish knives and their gaffs, not many and not soldiers but hers, ranged at her back without a word, and Sella stood in the hut door with the baby and her chin up. And Elowen stopped 6 feet from the lord of the Weirhold, and looked at him the way she had looked at me the first hour, the way a wild thing looks that has learned exactly what men are and has decided, this once, not to run. You came to bind my people, she said, not loud. It carried. You came up the water into the country I drowned in and dug out of and held for 7 years, past every soul on the hold too afraid to look, and the first thing you thought when you saw them alive was whose you could make them. She tilted her head. The scar pulled. I have hauled 7 half-dead strangers up out of that black water with my own hands, my lord, and warmed the dying ones with my own body, and buried the 2 I couldn't save, and taught the rest to want to live again. I know exactly what a person is worth because I've paid it in full 7 years running. She lifted her marked hand, and the gold of it burned between them. You don't get to bind a single one of them, not because of my king's law, though his law's good. Because they're mine, and I say no, and there are 4 wolves and 5 people, and a wolf king on this beach who will make my no mean something. Now put your dry foot back in your boat, Farron of the Weirhold, and take your kindness home before the flood falls too far to carry you over it. And think, all the way back, about the difference between a lord who came to claim the drowned and a woman who came to keep them. No one moved. The wolves growled low all together, a sound like the drownwood itself clearing its throat. Farron put his dry foot back in his boat. He said something as he went, some small poison about the council and the law and this not being ended, but it had no teeth left and he knew it, and the war punts backed off the mud and turned and went south down the falling water into the dead pines, and the drowned country swallowed the thunder of their oars, and then it was still again, and it was ours. And Aloan stood on her beach with her wolves and her people around her, breathing hard, the spear trembling now that it was over. And she turned and found my eyes across the width of it, and neither of us said anything, because the bond said it, that she had not needed my law after all, not really, that she had faced a lord and his dozen men on her own ground in her own courage and made them turn their boats, and that I had stood back and let her, and that this, exactly this, was the marriage. Not the king carrying the girl home from the water, but the king standing at the drowned woman's back while she held her own ground, and being proud enough to weep. She came home to Caerloch in the end, on the last high water of that spring, at the head of her own people, and it was not a rescue. It was a procession. We could not bring them all at once, so it took 3 crossings, the flat punt and the caracals ferrying south down the failing flood through the black spearwood, Aldous and Mara and the lads, Sella and the baby, the bundled tools and seed and the drying racks broken down, the whole broken pack that would not be broken, and last of all the wolves swimming the open channels in a grey wedge with the blind old bitch riding in the bow of Aloan's own caracal, because she could not make the swim. And when the last crossing came out of the drownwood into the open Greymere and turned south toward the hold, the water had fallen enough that half of Caerloch was down on the grey shingle to watch, because the word had run ahead of us now and could not be stopped, and I no longer wanted to stop it. The king's drowned wife alive, come home off the flood, and not alone. They stood on the shore, my people, the council among them, Aldith and Bramwell and even Farron in the back with his ruined smile, and they watched the little fleet of hide boats coming out of the north with a wolf pack swimming alongside, and a woman standing in the bow of the first one, brown and scarred and gray at the temple and burning-handed, and they did not see a rescued girl. They saw what she was. You could not look at her coming off that water at the head of those people and see anything but what she was. And when her caracal grounded on the shingle and she stepped out into the shallows of the hold she had drowned from 7 years before, the old blind wolf splashing down beside her, and the survivors coming in behind, and the wolves streaming up the beach shaking the Greymere off their coats. The whole shore of Caerloch, without any word from me, without any command, went down. They knelt. My people knelt on the grey shingle to the Luna who had come home off the flood, not because I told them to, but because there are some things a pack knows in its blood before its king can say them, and one of them is the sight of a Luna who kept the lost alive. Aldith was weeping. Bramwell, who had told me every spring for 7 years that the lake keeps its dead, knelt in the cold water with his old face broken open, and I heard him say to no one to the water, "It gave one back." After all, it gave one back. Aloan stood in the shallows and looked at her kneeling people, and I saw it almost undo her, this, more than the flood, more than Farron, this welcome, the softness of it after 7 hard years, and I came down the shingle to her side, and I did not take her hand because I had learned. I offered it, palm up, the gold mark burning, and let her choose. And she looked at my open hand, and she looked at her kneeling hold, and she looked back the way she had come, north, to the black line of the drownwood standing on the horizon where she had built a world out of drowned dead things, and then she put her scarred rough hand in mine, and both marks flared so that the kneeling people gasped, and she said, only for me under the bond, all right. Home. On our terms. All of them. All of them I sent back, always. That was 9 years ago, and I am telling it now at the far end of a good and crowded life, and I will end it the way it truly ended, which is smaller and quieter than the kneeling shore, because the truest things always are. We did not abandon the drownwood. I had promised her we would not, and I keep my promises to my Luna, having learned what it costs to lose her. The little hummock in the drowned forest is still there, still hers, still kept. We ferry out to it in the high water each spring, she and I in her own caracal with a new blind old wolf riding the bow, because the first one lived 4 good years at our hearth and died warm, which she had earned. And on the hummock we have built, in place of the turf hut, a good little season house of drownwood pine, and by it we keep a beacon. That is the ending. That is the thing I most want told. Eloan would not have the drownwood forgotten now that she was safe out of it, because she knew, as no one at the hold could know, that the flood still takes people every spring, and that the current still runs them north into the dead pines, and that most of them drown but some of them fetch up, half dead and alone on the hummocks, and that a soul half dead and alone in a drowned forest dies, not of the water, but of believing no one will ever come. So each spring, when the meltwater rises and the Graymere turns in its sleep, and the flood carries the winter's death down out of the mountains, we go out into the drownwood together, and we light the beacon on her hummock, and we keep it burning through the whole high season, a fire the lost can see across the black water and steer for, a place to wash up that has someone in it. And we walk the shore, the two of us, all through the flood as I once walked it alone, but not in grief now, and not to shame the water into giving back its dead. We walk it looking north at her burning beacon standing out over the drowned pines, and we wait to see if the water brings us anyone, and most springs it does, one or two, half drowned and giving up, and we haul them up out of the black water with our own hands the way she once hauled up 7, and we warm the dying ones, and we teach them to want to live again, and we make them ours. They ask her sometimes, the ones we save, why? Why a queen with a warm hall and a hold full of people would come out year on year into a drowned, dead forest to sit up nights over a beacon on the chance the flood coughs up a stranger. And she tells them the truth, which is the last thing I have to tell you, and the thing I have loved her most for across all the years. Out of everything, the water made her. Because once, she says, I washed up here alone and half dead and certain no one who loved me would ever be brave enough to look. I was wrong. He came. She turns her scarred hand over and lets them see the wave mark burning gold on it and mine matched beside it. So now I keep the light, so that no one washing up out of the black water in the dark ever has to be as certain as I was that no one is coming. Someone is coming. I'll always be coming. That is what the light is for. And that is why, though they still say on other holds that the lake keeps its dead, no one has said it at Caerloch these 9 years, because at Caerloch we know better. The lake gave one back, and she spends her life at the water's edge each spring making sure it never keeps another it doesn't have to, one burning beacon in the drowned country at a time.